You've talked about you are the person to call in when there's a blood clot, but a lot of modern medicine now is all about preventative medicine. So, and healthy living, eat right, sleep right, don't do this, do this. What sort of healthy living can a company do to avoid the blood clot in the first place?
There are a few things, or there are some very basic principles that a business can adhere to or abide by or make habitual part of the way that they do business, which maximise their chances of not falling into some form of financial distress. Communicating openly and honestly with all of the people involved is really going to improve your chances of restoring your company to some form of health. Communicating with your employees, for example, employees who are being told that everything's fine, don't worry, you've got nothing to be concerned about, the business is going to operate, the business is going to continue in the future and everything's happening as normal, may not be having their superannuation entitlements being paid, for example, by management in order to save on cash flow. Now, if management do something disingenuous like that in order to improve cash flow, then the employees are quite likely to find out about it at some stage, and that will have quite a disastrous impact on the perception of the ethics of the management team. Whereas if management come clean and actually say to the employees, we're facing some problems at the moment, we're going through some extremely challenging times, and we need everyone to move to an 8-day fortnight. Right? So employees get 2 days off a fortnight. That kind of thing is generally much better received by people like the employees, and you're much more likely to retain their enthusiasm and their interest and keep them engaged in the business while the business is going through a difficult time, which is what you need.
So we've got this dilemma. I mean, you've got the optimistic leader and you've got the pessimistic leader. The optimistic leader walks in and says, everything's fantastic, come on, we can do it, and tries to motivate and make their team passionate,
yes,
which is great when things are going well.
Yes.
But the optimistic leader that's doing that when things are running, like a hotel running at 10% occupancy rate, not that easy.
Yes.
Then you've got the pessimistic leader that tells the truth,
yes,
and everyone's morale's down. How do we keep the morale up and tell the truth?
Walk towards the pain. Like, basically, don't try and hide things. Right? Don't, if there are difficulties that the business is facing, don't try and conceal them. Turn them into a challenge. Turn them into something that you need to confront and face head on, and something to be dealt with.
As a whole organisation.
As a whole organisation.
Not just as a couple of guys at the top that keep all the windows closed and the...
No, as an organisation-wide issue. Make it something to be dealt with, not something to be ashamed of and something to be hidden. So, very frequently, when I get called in to assist with a business, it's basically you will come through the back door.
Oh, you must have to wear sunnies and a wig and
yeah, exactly.
meet out of hours at midnight.
Yeah, tap your left foot 3 times in the cafe, and I'll be have some kind of counter phrase or something like that to say. But management teams are often...
no one really wants to know you're there.
No, they don't. Sadly,
but you would like to come in through the front door and say, "Hey, here I am."
Well, basically, if you compare it to surgery, it's basically a case of saying it's much better for people to know that if there is a problem that's being dealt with. The analogy of the hotel one's really good, because if you've got a hotel running at 10% occupancy, everybody in the world can tell that hotel is not performing well. Everybody can see, particularly employees.
So you can't cover that one up.
You can't cover it up. So why try? Why try and pretend that there is no problem? Rather, isn't it better to communicate to the world and to communicate to your bankers, to your customers and to your employees that yes, there is a problem and we're doing something about it and we're tackling it head on. So rather than stick your head in the sand, walk towards the pain. And that's much more likely to encourage the support and in fact the admiration of all of those people around you, all those stakeholders in the business, like your customers, like your suppliers and like your employees, who are much more likely to support you if they think you're being honest and straight with them.
Heard stories that are happening around organisations before you get called in, before the media gets called in. Some horrendous ones of even a banker getting an Academy Awards for billing the most number of lunches in a week, and everyone cheers and claps and raises their wine glass for another wine as they pat themselves on the back for a great week. That's all good when things are going well, but as things start to go down, these things start to come to light, and I suppose that's when it's time for you to get called in.
Well, that's correct. It's certainly over the last period of time when we've had great times, these things have been hidden because everything's been going up. What we're beginning to see now is an uncovering of some of the things that have been going on for the last 10 years. It didn't matter so much, apparently, over the last 10 years because everything was going up. But when things start to turn down, well, then things that have been going on in the last 10 years begin to come to the surface. That's the first one. The second one is what people do when things begin to turn down. as Morgan was saying, it's the issue of whether you try and hide it or cover it up in some way. This is also one area where fraud is starting to emerge. In that attempting to cover things up, fraud is being used to attempt to cover it up. So people begin to manipulate their financial information that they're putting out there to the public to present the picture that they think the public wants to see. And that has been a hallmark of some of the largest corporate collapses in the last 10 years.
I've even read in some of these collapses that in some of their off-sites, the conferences they go to, and they have these award nights or, skits for whatever. These stories, way back before Enron even hit the papers or before you guys came in, these stories were already circulating that we're doing a few things, under the... It's really about getting to these straight before...
Well, provided shareholders are getting their dividends and provided everyone's happy and everyone's getting paid and no one's in trouble...
We laugh about those things.
It's all kind of funny. It's also... And you would prefer not to think about it.
Well, very recently where a bank fell over, and again, looking back after the event, people suddenly noticed, hey, they produced exactly the same result 2 successive years. Exactly the same percentage return on their investment in 2 successive years.
And that's what a forensic accountant does.
That's actually impossible to do, they said. It was even to 2 decimal places, 17.51%,
Wow.
2 years in a row.
And that's your job as a forensic accountant.
Well, it now looks obvious when you look back because that's too good. It's too perfect. They tried so hard to get that information to what people expected that it was actually too good. But that's what's happening behind the scenes when things begin to top off, is people try and cushion and hide what is actually happening underneath. They can probably get through that for a period of time, but ultimately the answer is going to come out. It's going to be revealed, and it's going to look ugly when it does.
So what are you suggesting for prevention then?
Well, one of the issues there is it's the classic old line. If something looks too good to be true, it probably is.
Catch it now before it happens.
Look now and
catch it now before it happens too late.
Exactly. And again, there have been massive examples recently where there have been people who've been attracting investors with very high rates of return, which everybody else says, we don't understand how this person can achieve that high rate of return.
But everyone trusts everyone else.
And
if Andrew does it, I'll do it. Is that
exactly.
right?
We have to get it as well. We can't afford to stay out because there's that much money being made there. And then 3 years later you find out, in fact, the whole thing's a big Ponzi scheme and nobody's making that much money at all and everybody loses billions.
And the bubble bursts,
the bubble bursts,
and away it goes.
Exactly.
And you've watched, your job is to study these bubbles and watch the cycles go up and down, so when it happens you're less surprised than anyone else.
Well, or in my case, it's sometimes after the bubble burst is actually going in there and finding out exactly what it was that occurred and who did it. Which individuals within the organisation were in control of what went on.
Can you summarise how to avoid that?
Well, I can summarise who actually usually gets involved. It's the people who sit in the position where they can get past all of the controls to prevent it happening. And those two people are usually the person who runs the business, the CEO, and the person who's head of the financial part of the business.
So what happens if an employee is at one of these off-sites and starts to see that the stories are getting a bit unethical, obsessed by greed, or let's take this for a run? What should an employee do?
Well, the studies show that in all of these cases where there have been major frauds, there are people within the organisation who already know what's going on and not participating themselves directly in terms of benefiting from it, but are aware of what's going on. And usually then the question is...
Are they liable?
No, but is there any mechanism by which they can alert anybody?
So you would suggest a company should have a built-in mechanism so the average person has an ability to stop these things happening before they get to the Enrons and the Anderson Consulting.
Well, certainly one of the key fraud prevention strategies is to have a hotline process whereby anybody inside or outside of the company can actually provide information on what's going on.
Anonymously?
Anonymously,
as quickly as possible to stop, so someone because often once it gets rolling and too big, no one really knows what to do, and we just hope that someone else will deal with it.
Exactly. And then these things can come from very odd situations. I remember going to look at a mobile phone manufacturer, and they were concerned that they'd got some fraud in terms of their stock being taken. And the whole way that came out was because one of the employees had a falling out with his wife, and his wife decided to come and tell the company what had been going on within the company through her husband. If there's no mechanism to collect that information, you won't be able to.